Hey everyone, I'm really excited to bring you this interview today. It's with a friend of mine named Sara Francis. She's a chemical engineer and she has a huge variety of industry experience across all sorts of stuff. From, process engineer at a copper mine to manufacturing director at an aerospace company. So she's acquired a ton of experience in a pretty short amount of time. So I'm confident that anybody watching this video is going to gain some insight from her story. And so just a reminder, these videos are meant to provide you guys, the viewers, with insight and lessons learned in your education and your professional journey. So if you have any recommendations or comments or suggestions that you want me to kind of dive deeper into or ask different questions, be sure to let me know. So with that, let's dive right into it. All right, here we are. Hey, thanks Sara for coming on. And I'm excited to really get into this with you. When I first had the idea to start doing these interviews, you were one of the people, that got me excited about doing these because you have such a good kind of unique story. So I'm really excited to kind of get into, your experience and, sharing it with everybody because I think there's a lot to gain from everything you've gone through. So why don't you just give everybody a short little summary, kind of what you went to school for and where you've worked so far?
Hey, well, good to be here. Thanks for having me. So my background is in chemical engineering. I graduated from the University of Utah, and since I graduated, I've had a variety of roles. When I first started, I was a production engineer right out of school, and then kind of after that, I started working for aerospace companies where I worked as a process engineer, a lead engineer, production manager, engineering manager, and kind of worked my way around different roles as I got more experience and learned more about the business. Yeah, that's just kind of a start of a little bit about me.
Cool. Okay. And how old are you?
33.
Sweet. So, because you have, more than anybody I know, I think you've had more of a unique kind of, you know, real diverse experience at
Yeah.
only 33, which is really cool. And I'm actually a little bit jealous of. Um, so okay, let's start all the way at the beginning. So you're a chemical engineer, right?
Yep,
Or at
correct.
least you studied chemical engineering. So tell me kind of what was the thing that made you go down that road? What made you interested in chemical engineering?
So when I initially graduated high school, chemical engineering was not on my radar. Actually, I was going into dental hygiene. I had picked that as my initial major, and I worked as a dental assistant in high school. That's kind of what I knew. So I thought, you know what, that's a good path for me. Um, but I started at Salt Lake Community College and started taking classes that were just for dental hygiene. And, I only took one math class. I wanted to keep taking more math, and it wasn't really taking me down the path of dental hygiene. I started to divert away from all of the classes for that major.
Yeah.
And so, really, what ended up happening was I met with an advisor and started looking at classes that would be interesting for me. And I really wanted a focus with math and science. And so, engineering popped up, and it was a little bit intimidating for me, just like the rigor of the schedule and not really knowing everything about it. So, I ended up going to my dad's work, and he introduced me to his boss, and she was a chemical engineer and really gave me a little bit of confidence to be like, you know what, if this is something you're interested in, I think, you should go for it, do your research. And I did. And then kind of the rest is history. I changed my major and kind of haven't looked back since.
So you started dental hygiene, which is pretty interesting, and
Yep.
then you liked math. So that's what kind of made you start thinking, oh, I need to switch over to something that's more math oriented.
Correct. Yeah. It was
Cool.
just, the challenge was there. And then, I started working as a math tutor at Salt Lake Community College. And so I thought, you know what, that would be a good, maybe hand in hand also for me of changing majors. And uh, it's kind of a different story, but that's kind of how I got on the path that I'm at.
Interesting. And what
Yeah.
what kind of work did your dad do?
My dad worked for an oil refinery. He retired for them. And so he worked.
So, and was that kind of what, you saw, so you saw the chemical engineer kind of role at a chemical or the oil refinery. Is that kind of what you thought maybe you'd want to go into?
Yeah. I took a look at a couple other different engineering, electrical, mechanical, chemical, probably those were the three. And, after talking to my dad and then, his boss, it was something that was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm intrigued by it. Um, and the other two, they were interesting to me, but I kind of just was gravitating towards that one. Still not fully knowing everything I would be doing. But
Yeah,
that one seemed like the best fit for me at the time. And
gotcha.
so that's kind of how I ended up picking that one.
If you could pinpoint it, what was it? Like, what was it about chemical? What was it about, I guess the conversations you had that kind of sparked your interest?
It's kind of hard to remember now,
Sure.
but I guess looking at it in hindsight, with a lot of stuff that I have done now, process engineering and being able to understand a system like holistically and then diving into it and, problem solving and things like that, that's seems like to me now, like my personality, it's something that I'm always, when I'm, assessing situations and looking at them
Yeah.
from life situation or work. Part of me thinks that was what a little bit of my dad's boss had talked about with me. And so it was like, you know what, I think I could be good at this. I want to try it, and it is very intimidating, but I'm just gonna try it and see, semester by semester
Just
how
jump in.
you know
That's
yeah,
totally how
jump
it was
in.
for me too. Just like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get through this, but how do you know unless you try, right?
Yeah,
I think a lot of people stop there, right? People get scared and um, they don't have 100% confidence that they can do it, so they don't even try. But I think it's important for people to just start trying. And before you know it, you start to make some progress you know,
yeah.
and that's kind of where the confidence comes, I think.
And I
Um,
think too, it's, for me, I couldn't envision like what will I exactly be doing when I get out of school. I wasn't one of
sure.
those people that was like, oh, yep, this is exactly what I'll do. But the challenge was there, and I think for me it was like, okay, this is good. This is something I want, and I'll learn and figure it out as I go, even if it's really hard or whatever I have to go through.
So let's get into that a little bit. So once you switched to chemical engineering, kind of how was that? What was the, experience like going from, I guess, the beginnings of dental hygiene into the engineering curriculum?
So initially, I did about 2.5 years at Salt Lake Community College. Wasn't a vast difference other than I was taking more chemistry, science classes. But for me, math always came very, like it was very intuitive and something that I really enjoyed doing. And
Yeah.
so I wouldn't say initially it was, oh my gosh, this is so hard kind of thing. Um, but eventually I started getting into those pre-engineering courses at Slick, and it was kind of like, okay, this is different. I started taking, I'm trying to think, just some of the courses, and they were challenging for me. And then the transition from Salt Lake Community College to the University of Utah was pretty big. That was probably the
Yeah.
biggest challenge of everything, was making that jump
To go there.
over
Yeah.
to go there. Yeah. Um, but
Were you, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, no. Go ahead. You're good.
What was your, did you take a full load the whole time?
Yes, I did. I always had like a full loaded semester consistently.
And I mean, were there some classes that you failed or close to failed or?
Yeah, so I didn't end up failing Calculus 1, but for talking about math and having, this love for it, I think I want to say I got like a C plus in Calc 1,
Sure.
and that was passing.
Yeah.
And I was taking that at Salt Lake Community College, and I was really bothered by it. And so I was so bothered by it that the following semester I signed up for Calc 1 and Calc 2 in the
Oh
same
my
semester.
gosh.
And
Everybody
I was
watching this video is going to be like, you're insane. Just take the win.
Yes. And so
That's
I
funny.
ended up I ended up taking both because I was like, hey, this is foundational for a lot of other math classes. Like I don't want to just get by with like a C plus. And
Yeah.
so I took both. I took Calc 1 and Calc 2 the following semester.
Holy cow.
And I think I ended up getting an A in it the following semester, as after two times of, hope that I would.
Yeah.
But so I again, I didn't fail that class, but to me, in my mind, I
Sure.
failed the class. And so I
Yeah.
was like not satisfied.
That's
So
impressive. And then what about
yeah.
Calc 2?
Calc 2, I passed. Like, I think it was just a transition for me going from, those lower level math classes to something different. And then it was like
Sure.
it clicked. And I never
Seems
took
like,
anything like that in high school. So
yeah, neither did there's a
yeah,
common theme, I think, at least with a lot of people in the United States, that, the gap from high school to college, at least engineering college, is pretty big gap, you
it
know,
is a big gap.
which is a big reason why I started this whole thing. But um, okay, so that's interesting because Calc 2 seems to get a lot of people. But anyway,
Yeah.
so then if we go on from math, what about some of your like core chemical engineering courses, like, I don't know, OChem and some of that? How did you fare in those?
I actually did pretty good in OChem. Those were not ones that ended up stumping me. One that ended up being really tricky, it was my first semester at the University of Utah, and my plate again was loaded with classes, and I think it was I'm drawing a blank on the introduction to like process engineering.
Sure.
So a very, very early on chemi class. That one, for whatever reason, I look back and it was really hard for me. And I think that not having a good study group right away and just feeling a little uncomfortable making that transition from Salt Lake Community to the U, I didn't have very good habits in place. So on top of like, I don't know if I gave it my all in that class. I really struggled with it, and it almost like I'm pretty sure I almost didn't pass that class either. I passed and I got by, but I was like, wow, this is one of the things I'm going into, and that was really hard, and it was a bit of a downer for a while of like, am I doing the right thing going into this?
Okay, so two things there. So you said you didn't have a good study group. Um,
Yeah,
so that's assume. So it sounds like you say getting a good study group's a good idea.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Finding people that are kind of at your same level or above you that you can kind of learn from and grow with, right?
Yeah, and just being able to talk through stuff. Like when you're doing homework and doing a problem, it's one thing, but being able to have a test and a whole set of new problems of like, did you learn the concepts or did you learn how to do the homework and did you work on it with people?
Yeah.
I don't feel like I did that well. Like there was probably many instances I did not do that well, but eventually you kind of start figuring out like, okay, I got to change up how I study and how I learn.
Yeah. Well, so let's go into that. Kind of what, I guess what specific changes did you make? How did you go, I guess what did you change to kind of make that jump to the next level?
It didn't come overnight, so I would say it took a little while, like with classes, but eventually, I found some friends that I built a study group, a small group that was like, okay, we're all kind of different backgrounds, and that was one really plus for me was having that core group to do homework with. And then, it's easy to say for a teacher, like, go read your chapter
Yeah.
and come back and I'm going to teach on that. And
Yeah.
like, I wasn't fully reading my chapters. I'm
Yeah.
skimming through. I'm like, hey, I'm doing the homework and I'm working backwards by reading some of the
Yes,
stuff.
yes, yes.
And it was like, I just wasn't, I felt like I was reading to read, not reading to absorb.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, like, I got a little better at it. I wouldn't say I'm like an expert by any means at like reading comprehension and all of that, but I did learn how to effectively try to read and be like, I read this. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it means.
Well,
And
because
talk to
before
people
this,
about it.
before I guess this level of, material that you have to absorb, at least I think my experience is similar to yours, where that you could get away with that, right? Where you just kind of,
Yeah,
get through the homework and then you kind of look it up in the book, as needed. But
yeah,
once I started the same as you, really committing to like, okay, I'm going to understand every single word that's in this textbook,
hmm
committing to that, that's really what made the change for me too.
yeah. It's like you can have a math problem and you can solve it, and then there's totally different where it's like application.
Yeah.
You're reading something and you have to read between the lines and be like, what is it asking me? What do I know? What do I not know? And
Yeah.
what did I just learn? And that took a while though. It wasn't like it
Yeah.
was not
Because
an
you
overnight
have
thing.
enough experiences where you like take an exam and your teacher, you know, throws a bunch of curveballs at you and doesn't you know structure the problems exactly like they were in your homework. So they're
Exactly.
like, oh crap, I didn't yeah,
And
anyway.
in
So it's
practice,
so
that scenario.
yes, so it's always
Yeah.
just smart. Anytime I talk to people about this, it's just like read your textbook. That's like number one.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then what about like time? How much time did you really increase the amount of time that you started kind of committing outside of school or outside of, the days you were at school?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, my schedule was here's the classes that I have, and then any time outside of that pretty much was used for studying. And then
Yeah.
eventually I got an internship. So it was balancing work, going to class, and then making sure to get like homework done in between that. And then really saying, like, yeah, I want to go do other stuff, but I have to get this stuff done first
It's
because
just
you can't just get by.
yeah, it's just has to become your number one priority.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So you mentioned internship. We'll get into that in a second. Um so okay, so like did you, but we're talking about some of the more difficult things. I guess what kind of things did you start to enjoy? Did you enjoy anything about your school experience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think back, especially now, too. I mean, you get to spend a lot of time learning. And I think sometimes when you're in the mode of school, you want to get done and you want to get by. Or I've definitely been in that. I'm like, I just want my job. Like I
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
be
yeah.
at the
Get me
end.
done. Yeah.
Yeah. And but building those relationships with teachers and your friends and people that you might work with one day, um, and learning, having the opportunity to learn and be like, I'm going into engineering. I get the opportunity today to learn from someone. Like
Sure.
those were positives for me and had the ability to ask them any question, good, bad, stupid. You're kind of like, all right, I read it and I don't know what this is, and then having someone be like, okay, yeah, I'll work with you and we'll figure it out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then really learning how to assess problems. It didn't matter what topic it was, whether it was heat transfer or anything like that. It's like, okay, you're presented with something. You need to start learning like how to assess a situation of what it is. What have you learned? How do you apply that? Like those things have always been, whatever topic it is, fun for me.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you are, I really appreciate if you hit that like button. And if you're thinking about studying in engineering or any other STEM degree, be sure to check out my book. This book is the step-by-step roadmap for anybody to get any degree they want. It's everything that I learned and implemented, to fill that mental gap and go from a 2.0 all the way to a 4.0 and a master's in engineering. Mindset, self-discipline, stress management, time management, lifestyle, studying performance, and of course, exam performance. It's all in here. It's helping out thousands of students all over the world. It's getting a ton of great reviews, and it recently hit the bestseller list in several categories on Amazon. And it's starting to get added to university curriculums to help the engineering students be better prepared for what's ahead. So, if you're a new student or you're just a current student and you're struggling with your classes a little bit, I guarantee this book will help you. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. I'll put links in the description for everything. Thanks for the support, and back to the video. So, you just made me think of something. So, like, I don't think it really matters what field of engineering you necessarily go into. I think one of the most, profound things that happens through school is you become a very effective problem solver. Like kind of no
Yeah.
matter what, I would say no matter what field you go into, you um all the material collectively transforms you into just a super, effective tool that you can just be deployed at whatever. And I think that's why at least in your case, you studied chemical engineering, but you went into manufacturing and all these other, because I think once you're an engineer, you're, at least as far as industry is concerned, you're just an effective problem solver. And that is so applicable to all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I those kind of skills, like you said, you can be any engineer, like different chemi or mechanical, and just having that base skill set is essential. And then it does give you the ability, if you want to try something different,
Yes. Because
you
I think
can.
people get really bogged down into like, oh, I'm never going to use this and I'm never going to use this in the real world. And it's probably true. You know, you're not going to use every single little specific thing you learn, but you got to look at it as like, okay, what is this? What is this whole experience collectively turning me into? And it's just, you're going to be a problem solver. Like,
Yeah,
and
they're like building blocks for you.
yeah, yeah,
What you get
it's,
from one class, you might add on to the next, and then it's kind of like, all right, I even if you get a couple things out of a whole semester, it's
yeah.
a couple extra things that you didn't have before
Yeah.
you
Well, and I
started.
think you know what else is it just builds confidence. As you start moving through
Yeah,
it, you just become more confident. You know, like at least that's how it was for me, like where you start like, oh, I can learn this and I can learn this and I can learn this. You know, I'm capable of learning basically anything. And like it's really a cool kind of transformation that happens where you're, you know, at some point you become this kind of um, you know, you're able to kind of you no longer doubt kind of what you're able to do and learn and you know kind of absorb because it's like oh I can I've been exposed to some pretty high level stuff and I can handle anything, which
yeah,
is
the
pretty cool.
confidence starts to grow.
So speaking of that, so you said you didn't fail any classes, but I do know that you failed something.
Yes.
You failed the FE exam, right?
I did,
And
yes.
so
And
so
that
for
was,
people watching, sorry, for people watching, I don't think a lot of schools require the FE exam anymore, but they did. They did when I went, and they did when you went. So the
correct.
FE, called the Fundamentals of Engineering exam, and it used to be required by most major universities that you had to pass it in order to graduate. And it was like, at least when I took it, and I think when you took it too, it was like an 8 hour exam, right? Was that how yours was?
Yep, 8-hour exam.
8 hours. It was brutal.
It
So
was brutal.
so tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so I signed up for the first test. I signed up and I was a junior, and I thought, I'm just going to get this over with. People are getting it over with, passing. Good. I'm going to be that person too. So I signed up, and I'll be honest, I did very minimal studying. I
Yeah.
worked very hard in my classes, and I was like, I'll just take the test. And I took the test, and at the time it took like 2 months to get results back. I don't
Yeah,
think it takes that long anymore.
no.
And so you take the test, you kind of forget about it, and then 2 months later you get something in the mail, I want to say, and
Yeah.
you open it up and it tells you, pass, congratulations, or you didn't pass, and it does tell you areas of like where you didn't.
Oh, okay.
And so if you're a person that passes, you would know that because you just got a
Yeah.
pass. So, anyways, I got this, and it said fail, and it showed me where, and I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I just finished my junior year. I just thought I had it in the bag, like I was gonna be done
Well,
with it.
well,
And
the other thing
I was
too is
not.
it's only given twice a year, right?
Yes.
Or it was.
So yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, I can't take it now for a while.
Yeah.
So I gotta sign up for the next one.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll be honest, I was one of those persons that it took me third time the charm. Third
Yeah.
time's the charm. So
Yeah.
I was not a natural test taker, and it really was, it was embarrassing. I talked to my advisor about it. And the initial time it happened, it was kind of like, poor me, right? Like I should have passed.
Sure.
And I finally came to the realization, this is not poor me. I'm capable of passing this. And like, I finally kicked it into gear. I started learning how to use the book that they give you for the test.
Oh,
How do
yeah.
I actually utilize that? Why
Yeah.
why would I turn to certain pages? Because for me, it was being able to understand that to successfully, you know, pass the test. Because you don't memorize stuff in engineering. You get to use
No.
tools. You
Yeah.
need to know how to use the tool and when to
Yeah.
use it and when to apply it. And that third time's the charm. I passed, and it was like, it was one of the best days because it really was like, will I graduate? I was
Uh,
really
And,
worried.
because it came down to it. Like it was like right at the end of your senior year, right?
It's
You
my
had to
last
pass
semester.
last
Yeah.
chance.
Yes. And
So
so
much
it was
pressure.
embarrassing, and I
No.
really didn't talk to a lot of people about it because it was like I just kept quiet and kept my
Yeah.
head down and was like, I'll keep studying and I'll make sure I pass, and I did.
Yeah.
But whew,
Yeah. Well,
stressful.
no. Okay. The reason I bring it up is because I think the majority of people that go through school have failures, and um it's not a matter of if you will. It's kind of what will you fail at, and then how do you respond. So let me ask you that. So like, how did you, I mean, you already kind of talked about it, but like, I guess, how did you respond mentally to kind of overcome that disappointment?
Honestly, the second time was worse because I felt like I had put an effort in
Yeah.
and I got another fail. And I see
Yeah,
these
dude.
areas. I can't even remember. Like some of the areas that were the hardest were classes that just mechanical engineers take and a chemical engineer does not take. Those were
Oh,
like, so those were some big areas for me where I was like, I never took dynamics. I didn't take this. And so I didn't really study those areas. And it was like, it doesn't matter that I didn't take them. It's on the test. I need to go learn like
yeah,
the electrical and the some of the mechanical stuff that like I'm not familiar with.
sure.
And so I ended up downloading, I think I went online and it was one of those like Kaplan
Oh, yeah.
courses. And there was one that was just for FE exams. And so I paid for it and I went through every single section of the test for the chemi portion and for the general portion at least 10 times each. Like I knew that book like the back of my hand for the third test and was like, I honestly think I finished before like normally I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm pushing it with the time. I was done on both sections and I felt
Uh,
really good on the third round.
on the
But
third.
downloading that for me helped. Like someone was teaching it and then I practice problems. Then I do another practice test. Like I just kept practicing, practicing, practicing. Whereas the other two times I was kind of like more like reading. But for me, I needed to do read, application, read, try again, and repeat. And
Yeah.
that worked for me. But maybe I'm not always the most natural test taker. So I did have to put in like maybe a lot more than maybe some people don't.
That's one big thing I think that's you don't really you're not really told when you start school is that you must become a good test taker.
Yeah.
Because at least at most schools, you know, I would say 60 to 70% of your grade is all exam scores. And most of your exams
Yeah.
are timed, right? They're all timed to like 90-minute exams. So you have to be a good test taker. And if you don't become one, then you're just going to not do well.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So you just kind of put your head down and grind it. Did you ever kind of take a confidence hit, or did when you got your failure scores, did you just say, were you kind of stubborn about it and just say, I guess, like, how did you deal with like, did it mess with your confidence at all? Because I think,
Yeah.
there are certain people it would, when you fail at something, it kind of, people start to question if they're capable or not.
Yeah. It really hurt my confidence. The group that I studied with, everyone in my group passed that first time.
Oh,
We
geez.
all took the test together as juniors, and the moment we all got our mail that day, everybody's texting about
Oh,
passing.
geez.
Nobody's hearing from me, and so that
Oh
was
my
like a
gosh.
sign for them. And the guys
Yeah.
that I worked with, they were like, "Oh no, this isn't good. She's not responding."
Yeah.
And so yeah, it really hurt my confidence. And then you go to school like the next day and everyone who took it with you, like,
Like,
oh, did
hey,
you pass? What about
yeah,
you? And
yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And I looked at my study group like, none of you better say anything.
Oh my gosh.
So, because I was just embarrassed. I'm like, wow.
Ah,
Like,
dude.
and those that weren't passing, I don't think were saying anything either. Like
Yeah.
me. So I didn't know who they were. Um, until the next test and you're like, oh yeah, I remember seeing you.
Yes.
Um,
You're in it together now.
Yeah, so it definitely hurt on the confidence side, and it put a lot of pressure on that last semester. It was like, hey, I'm supposed to be done with school. I'm doing good in my courses, but
Yeah.
this is going to be a deal breaker if I
Yeah.
don't. And so I had this notion at one point too, going to my advisor and like petitioning it. I'm like, I've been doing great in my classes. Like, I don't think this is fair. And then it was like, nope, say that. Like, just you need to
Just get
go
it done.
work hard and you need to get it done. So I
Um,
did.
yeah. Do you kind of feel a little bit, you know, I feel a little bit angry that the kids nowadays don't have to take that test because they
I don't
don't
know
know
if
what
I
we
knew.
went through, right?
I don't know if I knew that like they don't have to take it
I don't think
now.
they do. Yeah, I don't. At
Um,
least a lot of schools, I
but
don't think they do anymore.
I mean, after going through it, I'm like, okay, yeah, now everyone has to go through it. So,
Yep.
but I did hear they changed, the format a little bit, the testing, you get scoring back a lot quicker. So, I mean, I hope for those that do have to take it, it's a smoother process than it was.
Sure. All
So,
right. We don't. That's perfect. So let's go back. You brought up internship. Um, I guess what was that like? How did you get that internship? Because I mean, one of the hugest things, once you start getting into your sophomore and junior year is like internship, right? Everybody's got to get one, and there's only so many to go around. So kind of, what was that experience like for you?
yeah, okay, so I'll just start back. It took me 5 years total to get my engineering degree. So
Sure.
when I say sophomore, I was in my third year, but I was a
Yeah.
sophomore,
Yeah.
and I was at the University of Utah at this point. So I heard about the career fair. My teachers were talking about it, and they basically recommended, hey, we recommend going to the career fair. It's a good opportunity to start learning about companies that are out there that are searching for individuals like yourselves, chemical, mechanical degrees, and probably other degrees too that weren't even like engineers. But I was, obviously heavily focused on the engineering side. And so I put together my resume as best as I could. I don't think I had anyone review it.
Yeah.
And I showed up at the career fair thinking like, I'm just gonna put my resume out there and see. And a lot of people were like, typically people don't get an internship at this point. But I thought like, I'll just go for it and see what happens. Um, I didn't really have a lot of experience talking to people too. I started talking to recruiters. They're like, "Why do you want this?" And I'm like, "I need an internship. Like, I'm going to be a chemical engineer."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
and I put my resume out there to a lot of people. I printed it out. Didn't hear back from anyone except for one mining company. And it was probably a month or two later, and they reached out saying like, "Hey, we took a look at your resume. We're looking for summer interns. Would you like an interview?" And I was so excited. I was like, "Wow, they actually want me, and I have no experience with anything. Like this is so
Yeah.
cool."
Yeah.
And so I interviewed with them, and I had, I think, 3 rounds of interviews, and ended up being one of the candidates that got selected to have summer internship with them.
Was it
And
just a summer, or did you go longer than that?
it was supposed to be a summer, and then two of us were local to Utah there were 6 total interns that were hired at this facility that I worked at,
Uh-huh.
and two of us were living in Utah. So at the end of the summer, they asked us to stay on as work study interns if we chose to.
Gotcha.
And we both actually had become friends and were in a study group. So it was very nice to have like someone I had studied with and then like them have an internship. And so we both stayed on, which was really nice for both of us.
So go to career fairs, basically, right?
Yeah.
I think people kind of have the assumption that uh, it feels like speed dating for jobs, but there's real
Yeah.
opportunity that comes out of career fairs for sure. I actually got a job opportunity at a career fair too, or a job. I got hired um, at a career fair as well. I mean, so just for everybody watching this video, don't to make sure you hit every career fair because I would say the large majority of companies that are there are because they're hiring. So, um, and then on top of that, a lot of companies, I don't know if this is how it was for you, Sarah, but I know that they'll do legitimate interviews like at the career fair, later, at
Yeah.
least after the main kind of thing. So make sure everybody goes to career fairs. They're definitely worth doing. And then also go to career fairs that are not at your school because there are lots of career fairs that happen at other universities that you can go to. So anyway, so that's awesome. So you got a job, your first career fair right off the bat. That's awesome.
Yep. It was really exciting and it was a good place to intern.
So then you graduated eventually, right? And
Hmm.
let's go, I guess let's move there. So did you keep working at this place? And let's go back a little bit. You said it's a mining company.
Correct. Yeah.
What did they
Mining
mine?
company. Copper. So I
Copper.
worked at a copper smelter.
That's so cool. That's such a unique first
Yeah.
job. So they hired you right out of school.
So I did get a job offer from them right out of school. But something else I did when I was a senior, that last career fair before graduating, I attended that and I put my resume out there again,
Uh-huh.
saying like, "Hey, I've got experience now working here," and I was like, "I'm going to see what else is out there."
Yeah.
Um, and so I got the opportunity to interview for a couple companies, and I ended up not taking the job with the company I was at with my internship.
With the mining company.
Yep, I ended up working for a like a laundry detergent manufacturing company. So I jumped ship like to something very
Totally
different.
different. Well, so
Yeah.
before we go there, can you tell us kind of what you did at the mining company? What was your role?
Um, yeah, so the like title and was like called like a technical like work study intern. But
Yeah.
basically what I did, I studied under just a couple of the engineers there. Um, Part of the copper smelting process, there's obviously the smelting process itself, and then there's the byproducts that come off of it. I worked more on the byproducts team. Um, and really the woman that I worked for, she had engineering projects and I helped her with them, whether that was mapping out exactly like what are all the byproducts of copper smelting? How do you trace where they're going at our facility? Um, really understanding like the process control behind how product gets from point A to point B, kind of thing. And so I just did a lot of that with her. And then I also worked in our filtration plant, which was when you're, to just give some background, there's a concentrator, and the
Well,
concent. Okay, there's
start at like the beginning. So like the ore comes
yeah,
out of the ground, and then what happens?
yeah. So the ore comes out of the ground, and you basically have you just have large rocks, let's
Yeah.
say, and those get delivered to a concentrator.
Yeah.
And what the concentrator is doing, they're taking the large rocks, they're grinding them down into smaller ones, and then they start a chemical process where they're going to start extracting. It's kind of like a slurry, like material, and they're going to start extracting probably like 20 to 30% copper out of that ore.
Got it.
And then at that point, once it gets to about 30%, it's going to get delivered from a concentrator to a smelter. And at that point, you have furnaces and different equipment that's going to extract like a slurry filtration from a 30% copper to a 97% copper. And that's what the goal of the smelter is to get it
Got
from
it.
that percentage to that. And so, one of the jobs that I had too was understanding the slurry that was coming in from the concentrator. The more throughput you have, throughput is huge in like every company. We can
Yeah.
have more, we're going to make more money, we're going to get
Yeah.
stuff out faster.
Yeah.
Well, it was understanding you're not always going to have the same concentrate. How can I get more volume through quicker? And so I had a little pilot area where I would take different types of slurry and use different chemicals and start understanding like how to filter different types of filters to get it through our process as an introduction into the smelter and getting it going into our furnaces.
Huh.
And so I had a bunch of like projects like that where it was okay, understanding the slurry that's coming in. Okay, another byproduct is sulfuric acid, and there's a sulfuric acid plant that's at the smelter. And so I did get the opportunity to kind of bounce around different areas and engineers that would say, "Hey, I need help with this," and it would be working alongside of them, and they
That's
would take
cool.
the lead on the project, and then I would help with testing or analysis on kind of what they'd be working on.
That sounds like a pretty good internship experience. Not every
Yeah,
internship is the same, but that sounds like a pretty good one where you were really thrown into it and you had you got a lot of hands-on stuff.
yeah. I think the hands-on piece was really good for me to be able to not just, be at my desk and working, but also get out there, be in the field. How do you understand and take a look around? And like, it's very, intimidating looking at a process like
That,
instrumentation diagram and then looking at the actual thing and being like, what am I looking at? What am I working
yeah,
with?
that's really cool. So, okay, so then you go from there, you graduate, you go from there to a detergent company.
Yep.
I guess
So
what
big
go,
change.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so what'd you do there?
I got hired as a production engineer, and really what that entailed was it's kind of the same as a process engineer, supporting their manufacturing processes. So they made laundry detergent and they also made the bottles that the soap goes in. So it's blow molding and injection.
Hmm.
And I primarily got put on the blow molding and injection side. And it was really understanding anything and everything about manufacturing, at least in the worlds that I've been in, is like you get to a job and they're like, we want you to understand everything about it and how it's made. So then you can start understanding
How to
where the
improve it.
deficiencies are and how
Yeah.
to improve it. And so, like one of the things was blow molding. We make a bottle that we want to use more recycled material, but it also has a threshold of failure if a customer were to drop the bottle. And so that was something I got to work on is how can I get more regrind and recycled material into a plastic bottle? And they're all different. I mean, the Costco bottles, you got lots of different ones. Um, how to make sure that there's that happy spot of like not having a failure with dropping it, but
So when you say
making sure you're
regrind, you mean, what does that mean?
basically if a bottle is bad, like let's say you blow mold a bottle
Uh-huh.
and it's plastic and there's something wrong with it, it'll get rejected. That material gets ground up and that ground up material goes back into another
Got it.
bottle. So you're
Okay.
constantly like reusing and not having to
Sure.
scrap a lot of plastic.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like there's a happy balance of using, post-consumer resins and virgin material in addition to recycled material. So you're, being environmentally friendly and not having to waste kind of thing.
Interesting.
Um, and so, yeah, my job there was just, again, just to really understand like, how do we get from point A to point B with these processes and really understand like what opportunities exist, where can I save money, where can I be more environmentally friendly, um, and yeah,
Interesting.
kind of
So,
that.
because I think most engineers, at least process and manufacturing, the goal is, faster, higher volume, lower cost. That's like your job, right?
Yeah,
Um, so okay, very cool. So, and then eventually, did you get into management at that place?
I did not. Nope.
Did you, I guess, did you want to?
No,
Not
not at
really.
that point. I think for me, I was still really absorbing like what I was doing as, an individual contributor and
Yeah.
learning like
Yeah.
how to, again, help, like you said, reduce cost, increase throughput. They start throwing a lot of terminology at you too, like lean manufacturing
Yeah.
and like different things that I wasn't exposed to. So it was like there's a lot of learning curve there for working at a company, whereas I didn't learn some of that in school. So
Gotcha. Very true. They should teach
yeah,
that in school.
yeah.
Um, they might nowadays. I'm not sure. But so okay. So how long did you stay at the detergent company?
Um, Almost 3 years,
And then you kind
not
of
quite.
felt like you learned what you needed to learn, and then you moved on.
Yeah, I did. I learned a ton from them, but I kind of at the end was just sort of searching for something else, and so
Sure.
I started looking for other opportunities.
And so what's the next one?
So the next one was carbon fiber manufacturing, and I got hired on with them as a process engineer
Gotcha.
initially. Yep.
And so did they build? I mean, like when you think of carbon fiber, I guess you think of airplanes and
Hmm.
fast cars. Like, did you guys create parts, or did you create just like raw carbon fiber?
Raw carbon fiber.
And then
So yeah. So basically, the company I worked for, they were vertically integrated in the sense of like I worked in an area where they made raw carbon fiber, but they also sold to themselves where they started to do other applications with it.
Oh, very
So
smart.
um, they had facilities kind of all over the US where they sold to themselves and they also sold externally to other places as well to do whatnot with the carbon fiber. But yeah, I worked just at the kind of the upfront process.
Was it pretty similar role that you had to the detergent company?
Um, I would say that the detergent company was more, well, I'll say this, working for an aerospace carbon fiber manufacturing, as far as I went from, a semi-regulated, I would say they were regulated
Oh,
in the
yeah.
sense of it's going to a consumer, but then I
Yeah.
became into a world of very regulated industry. And so
Yeah.
it was different in that sense of when I'm watching different properties of carbon fiber and managing them as an engineer and any deviations, like just it was just different being in a regulated industry like
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
hadn't been as exposed to.
Less freedom, right?
Yeah,
To kind of, yeah. Gotcha. Okay, and then you got into supervision at the carbon fiber place?
I did. Yes. So I was a process engineer. I want to say for at least two years,
Uh-huh.
and there was an opportunity that came up to build new carbon fiber lines within that facility. And so I wasn't in a leadership role at that point, but I knew I was starting to become intrigued and interested. And so I had seen one of my other coworkers, she had managed bringing up a brand new carbon line, and she was a commissioning engineer of there's all the equipment and working with a team of engineers. Well, they wanted to do another brand new line. And so I volunteered to do that. I was like, hey, on top of doing my regular job, I want to help commission a brand new line and be the
What does
lead
that
engineer on that.
what does that mean, like a new line? Is it just because there needs to be more a whole new different, I guess, product that you haven't made yet? What does that mean?
Yeah, so as volume and capacity and like demand increased for the carbon fiber, it meant that this facility needed to start expanding. The amount that they were producing on the current manufacturing like production lines was not enough. And so it was
Gotcha.
like, okay, now we're ready to start spending money to build a brand new you know, carbon line that can produce because we have more volume and we need
Yeah.
it. And so because that demand came, and carbon was just growing so fast that it was like, all right, we need to stay ahead of this so we can meet the demand that's here now and coming in the future.
So you volunteered to do a new line. Did you start at that point? Did you take on people underneath you?
So, no, I did not. I didn't have anyone directly reporting to me. And I think that was kind of nice because you learn to work with engineers and others by having to influence without having that authority
Oh,
of
okay.
like, hey, you work for me, you need to you need to do this. Um, so for me, it was nice because it was a lot of the engineers that I worked with. They were my peers, but it was like, hey, I'm going to oversee this entire production of we're going to get a new oven and we're going to need to commission that as an engineer, meaning I need to know everything about it, how it works, how to test it, and how to
Yeah.
properly bring it up so when we start up it's successful. Well, it was helping assign each engineer to different equipment and then working with them and helping them on how to do like what what needed done from a commissioning standpoint, for an entire production line.
Yeah.
And we're talking piece by piece equipment and then making sure it's streamlined and working and functionally able to like collaboratively work together. And
Uh,
so I like that because it was really stressful and it was a lot more work than I was anticipating, but it did give me the opportunity to try to work with people and understand like how do I motivate people when they don't work for me,
yeah.
and keep them staying positive when you're working tons of hours and people are tired and they're annoyed with each other and they're like, I don't want like, you just
Sure.
get kind of burnt out. And eventually it finished and it was successful. And so it was exciting. And I'm like, all right, I want more. Like I like that. What other opportunities are there? And so when I talked to my manager, they ended up creating a role, a lead engineer role, because I had been talking about it and talking about wanting something, and different things were not available at the time. And so they ended up creating a role for me to have a couple direct reports reporting up through me as a lead engineer. So that was kind of
Cool.
my first experience of managing.
Gotcha. Because I think, and then I guess we'll get a little bit more into it, but um, I guess being a people manager is very different than being an individual contributing engineer. But you've kind of gone
Yes.
full circle with that. So, okay, so then you moved forward with that, and then you had another kind of opportunity come up right there.
Yes. So at that time, I had been a lead engineer maybe for like another 2 years or something. So I kept working there, and another opportunity came up to, they were starting to build another facility for this carbon manufacturing facility in France. And I had gone over a couple times because they had started the construction and they needed engineers to support and go over and help and again build another manufacturing line to produce more carbon. And I went over there pretty frequent. And eventually the opportunity came up that they were looking for someone to permanently go over there, really an expat assignment for someone to go over there and help as an engineer and as a production manager to oversee operations.
Yeah.
Um, and so um, I brought up that I was interested, and kind of like one thing after another, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, like this is real if you want to do it. And in my head, I was like, what? Like it's like I almost like I wanted it, but I didn't know it was going to happen, and then it happened.
And then it just went
So
down.
yeah,
So you moved to France.
yep. Moved to France. Still got to be a process engineer, which I loved. And I
Yeah.
also, in parallel to that, I got to be a production manager where I started managing operators and
So
the supervisors.
how many people were underneath you?
So I had a supervisor working like below me, and then with who worked for him, there was 5 different shifts, and I would say there's probably 40 operators total with rotating shift work
Yeah.
for this. And so it was quite a bit of people from going from really no one to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, for sure. And then on top of that is the culture change, right? Is like what you were used to here. And then I guess tell us a little bit about that. What was that like in, going from the culture you're familiar with to the French culture?
yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, the first month I was really excited. I'd had a lot of experience with, working at the facility in Salt Lake, and I go there and I'm like, yep, this is kind of what we do. And I'm thinking like, all right, we're going to do it. And sometimes it just didn't happen. And I would be like, what, what is happening? Like in my head, it was a straight like win.
Yeah.
And when stuff didn't happen, it was kind of like, oh, like what's going on? And
Yeah.
for me, honestly, when I look back, it's just people there were amazing. They're willing to do whatever it takes to be successful. But just being in any country, in any culture, like I look back and it's like, you know what, I should have taken a step back and really understood how do I motivate these
Sure.
individuals. And I didn't do that right away. I just was like, let's go. Let's
Yeah.
do this. This is what
Yeah.
I know. I know, not we
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And
Like
so,
kind of like you have to respect me. Because yeah.
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 So it was good. It was good for me to learn that, and it almost needed to happen the hard way for me because I remember it so well now, and makes it so you don't, hopefully try not to make those mistakes again.
Well, I talk about getting thrown into the, furnace, like the, you know, school of hard knocks kind of thing. Here you go. Here's a whole huge team of people. We're going to fly you out there and
Yeah,
you have to manage them. Oh, and by the way, like they speak a whole other language, which you learned a little bit of French, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, a lot of it. I learned it very slow, but between all the apps and everything we have, like I figured it out quick.
Figured
And
it
they
out
do
quick.
not all directly translate, especially in a technical world.
Sure.
So you've got to be
Yeah.
careful with that.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
it sounds like it was challenging at the time, but I guess but you look at it now as like a good experience.
really good experience. I had some really low days of just frustration of like, you can see where you want to go and you're like, "Ugh, we're not getting there." But then I look back and I'm like, there's all these small wins of like, all of the team has great ideas and they were actually different than from Salt Lake. And I'm like, actually, this seems like it might be better than what we're doing. And I never even
Hmm.
thought of that because I'd seen it for, they were like, this is what's been working for 20 years. Oh, okay, great. Then you go
Yeah.
there and people haven't done it and you're like, wow, they found another way and they
Yeah.
showed me. And that really taught me like, don't settle. Even when something's been working well, you're like,
Yeah.
there might still be a better way.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in my work too, where,
Yeah.
people just get kind of locked into how you've been doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, for
For
sure.
sure. That's cool. So how long did you stay there?
I was there for just about a year, a little bit over a year. And yeah, I came back. It was initially supposed to be like, I think, a 2-year contract. And then um, another position ended up opening up, same company.
Yeah.
And I ended up interviewing for it. And I kind of knew, like, okay, this was kind of like maybe going to be the time frame. And so it worked out of applying for this. But an engineering manager role opened up at this company, but in Salt Lake. And I ended up interviewing for it and was like, okay, I think we're at a point where we've got engineers set up in place at this facility. Is it perfect where it's at? No, but I think a lot of the work that I had done was in a good point. And
Yeah.
so I ended up moving back and becoming engineering manager
At that
for the
same
same company.
carbon fiber company, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Okay. So at this point, let me ask you, I guess, what do you think people should, how do I put this? Like, if you compare kind of your experience in school to kind of your experience in work, in the real world, um, was it what you expected? What could people do to kind of prepare to be more successful that way?
I think for me, it's is getting an internship. For me, having the opportunity to do school and have some of that application at the same time was really
Yeah.
good for me.
Yeah.
Um, or just, yeah, seeing what opportunities are out there because school really prepares you again from a standpoint of like you learn a lot of theory. You're solving problems. You're really strengthening that area. And then you get into a workforce and every company is unique and they want you to kind of mold into their company and kind of teach you their way.
Sure.
And so if you have that experience of an internship, you're like, hey, I had to mold into kind of that way of understanding the company and really what they need. Um, and I think that's for me, that would be what I'd recommend to someone is take as many opportunities as you can or meet professionals, if you
Yeah.
can through networking or whatever to ask them questions about their experience and like what was good, what was bad. Kind of like this, like understanding, you know,
Sure.
different
Well,
people's perspectives.
and I was talking the last interview I had with my friend Brad. If an internship isn't necessarily available or you're not having luck, you can still, I think a big thing people should know is that you can still get involved in a lot of these technical slash, engineering industries, but not necessarily through an internship, job.
Yeah,
It could be like a technician or an assembler or an operator. You're still in the thick of it
absolutely.
with engineering, and you're getting great experience and getting your network built, pretty successfully. Um, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an internship. You can go work at these companies, you know, just
Yeah, for sure.
not, it doesn't have to be through the internship route. Okay, cool. Um, all right. So then you were an engineering manager for a couple of years, and then I guess tell us what happened from there.
Um, so eventually I ended up, so I was engineering manager for a while
And this is
and
this
someone,
is you now you don't do basically you're not an individual contributor anymore. Now you just have a team of people that you manage, right?
yep. Someone who I'd worked with previously at this carbon company had moved on to another company
Yeah.
and eventually reached out to me to, kind of do some like headhunting of like, hey,
Come
we
over here.
have this other engineering manager role. Um, is it something you're interested in? And just to give, some context with times and everything, it was around like this was 2020 of, kind of in the midst of all COVID and everything. And
Yeah.
um commercial aerospace started to take a hit as far as like volumes and everything. And so I started kind of just assessing like, okay, I think my job is safe, but I may start looking for some other opportunities
Oh,
just in case.
yeah.
And
Okay.
so I kind of made the decision of like, I'm going to start opening that up of, so I ended up moving to another company that was still aerospace, but it was primarily government contracts. And it seemed to me at the time to be, as far as like stability went, like I'd be a little bit more stable. And so, and I knew someone I had previously been working with there.
Yeah.
So I interviewed for a different engineering manager role and a couple different interviews and ended up getting that job and finally made the switch from carbon. I worked for that company for quite a while, and then I moved on to another company that manufactured gearboxes and housings for helicopters and aircraft.
That's cool. So then, um, wh- okay, and then let's get into that a little bit. So, similar role, engineering manager, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, I mean, did you like being a manager? Did you like, being a leader instead of an individual contributor?
So I think there's pluses and minuses to all of them. I liked being an individual contributor because you get these individual projects and you really get to be hands-on and work on them. When you move to the leadership role, maybe you get a little taste of that here and there, but the
Yeah.
intent is that your team is working on those things and you're able to help them be successful, manage their projects and get them done.
Yeah.
Um, I I started to really enjoy like the development piece of engineers. Like this is kind of like everyone's strengths on my team. I started working in an industry where it was more mechanical based too. It was no longer like as much chemical. And so
Yeah.
some of the engineers I worked with, they had a lot more technical experience than I had. And my expertise at that time started just transitioning to more leadership.
Yeah.
Okay, how can I make sure you get opportunities? This person wants to move up. Like you really want to I wanted to make sure my team was happy and they wanted to stay working for a company because to me it was your boss can make or break your
Sure.
work.
That's
And
interesting.
I didn't want to be that manager that had people leaving. And so I was
Yeah.
like, how do I make sure they feel like we're invested in them? We care about their future and like where do they want to go? And so yeah, I wasn't doing as much technical work anymore. It was making sure they stayed on the technical work and I made sure I stayed on the leadership of
Yeah.
where they contend. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I really
It's
liked it.
it's an interesting transition because I think there's a lot of engineers that find themselves in leadership roles, or,
Hmm.
I guess start to look down that road. I mean, as far as what do you think, you know, what were your characteristics that kind of opened those doors for you that you would, I think tell other people to work on and if they wanted to get into leadership?
I think you start, or for me, I just started realizing, like, as an individual contributor, there was almost bigger things at each company that I wanted. I did want to, um, I wanted to help almost the greater good of like my department, not just like, hey, I'm working on this project and like I made this one accomplishment. It was like, okay, as a team, like we could get this done. And
Yeah.
sometimes I didn't always see that happen. And in my head, I'd wonder, like, I wonder why we're not doing that. Like, I didn't know what was going on, like above and like discussions. And so, like, the more I inquired, for me, I think if someone's interested in a leadership role, you bring it up. You should talk to your
Yeah.
manager. Like, you're in charge of your career.
Yeah.
That you do not need to wait for them to come up to you. And I didn't want to wait. And so I started just asking those questions and being like, okay, I'm interested. And then a job got created for me because they were like, okay, I don't think she's going to drop this. She's interested in it, but like,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that, right? Become the squeaky wheel
Yeah,
where, just start talking. Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that. And I think a lot of people fall victim to the, kind of put my head down and be quiet and eventually I'll get taken care of, right? It's like, no, you have
yeah,
to go make, you have to be your own advocate for sure.
yeah.
Okay.
You're in charge of your career. You can make
Yeah,
it happen, and if you're content being individual contributor, that's totally fine because that's a really good path you need from a lot of people. And then if you're
sure.
not, then make sure you voice it. What is the path I can take to get there? Like if I can't get there today, how do I get there in 3 years or 2 years? Like work on it with your manager if they're,
Yeah, stay on top
willing
of
to
them
do that with you.
so that
Yeah.
you're kind of at the front of their mind for sure. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Um, okay, so you were at the aerospace, like, well, it's kind of aerospace, but the manufacturer, right? Gearboxes.
Hmm. Yep.
So then you were an engineering manager, and then did it progress from there?
Yes. So I was engineering manager and then eventually, I keep saying eventually, but director of operations position had opened up and was kind of like I had done operations before at my previous job and I was enjoying my engineering role at this current job, but I thought like, you know what? This is opened up and I was very like, I want to climb the ladder. Like when
Yeah.
I started moving up, I just became like ladder hungry of like, hey, this is there. I think I can do it. And I have confidence in myself. I'm gonna go for it and I'm gonna try it. And I ended up getting that opportunity. And I served as the engineering manager and director of operations at the same time. So I
Oh,
ended up
really?
keeping both roles. Yes.
For the whole time, did they never backfill?
Um, they did after I left, but it got to a point where it was pretty tough for me from a standpoint of managing two different groups, and the workload progressively just got, heavier and heavier. And it slowly got me thinking about this kind of transition of like totally different of
So
climbing the ladder.
how many hours were you putting in?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I would say I for sure would get to work at 6:30 every day and I would stay for whenever people wanted. Like I could stay till 6 at night. I could do 12 hours. I'd come in on the weekends. I'd come in at night. Like I would do anything that it took to like get the job done because I do become obsessed and I want it to be good. Um,
Yeah.
but it definitely catches up to you, or it caught up to me.
So would you say like 60-hour weeks is what you were doing? 50, 60, some
Yeah.
probably.
Yep. And I
And
had
then
done that before too. Like that kind of had become a norm even at
yeah,
my other company. Like it was kind of ingrained in me like to get the job done, you need to put this in.
yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot of companies like that, I think. Um, okay, so how many people were under you at that point?
Um so I had about 10 engineers still. And then I had a couple of supervisors. So I only maybe I would say three or four supervisors that reported to me, and then underneath them were operations, like operators. So I had the 10 engineers, probably plus four supervisors, so about 14 direct reports.
And then, but then overall, you were like over a couple hundred people, right?
A couple of hundred people, yes. And so those supervisors, it kind of stemmed from them
Stemmed
and the
out, yeah,
people working. But yeah, overall, the entire facility, like operations and the manufacturing engineers, we had a design group as well. The manufacturing engineers still reported up through me. So it
gotcha.
grew.
It grew. So you
It grew.
said, kind of when it happened, you're kind of ladder hungry, right? You want to move up, move up, move up. And I think
Yeah.
once you get into the corporate world, I feel like it's almost, I don't want to say expected, but it's just kind of like, oh, this is what you do now. You try to get
Hmm.
promoted, you try to get into management, you kind of just try to keep moving up and up and up. That's what everybody should want. Um, when that's, you know, which is great, I think for some, but it's not necessarily the best thing for everybody, especially, I don't know, at least it sounds like from your experience, you kind of started to really feel the the imbalance, right, of your like
Yeah.
work life situation.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely started to catch up to me. And, I was really passionate still about like management and being able to develop people and making sure that like their careers went where they wanted to be. But like I didn't feel like I was doing a good job because the role had grown and had expanded so much. And then my own, personal life, like I was working, and when I was home I was thinking about work, and it was just this
Yeah,
constant cycle of like, I don't know if this is what I was envisioning. I thought it was, and once I had got there, it kind of started to change over time, and for
interesting.
me, yeah,
So you got the role, right? And you probably got paid really well and all this stuff, but it was kind of
yeah,
taking over your life.
yes.
Yeah. So how long did you do it for?
Gosh, this company, I want to say like 2.5 years total between the engineering manager role and director of operations. So not nearly as long as the previous company, but for me, I think that like burnout reached me all of a
Interesting.
sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then at that point you started to realize you wanted more of a work-life balance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so then
Yep.
and I guess what happened after that?
So kept working, and I just started to look for other opportunities, and to look for other opportunities takes some time as well. So
Yeah.
anyone that's applying for jobs, you're like, gosh, it's interview to make sure you've got a good resume and cover letter. And I decided, you know what? I am going to leave my job. I don't have a job lined up, but I'm going to take the time to find something that has a work life balance, still an engineering role, but I think I'm ready to take a break from management and be an individual contributor again,
Yeah.
and see if I can find that work life balance of
Yeah.
being happy with my job, but also being able to be happy outside of that.
To be able to live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Well, so you reminded me of something. So let's see, you've been hired 5 times. Is that right?
Um, I've got, oh, like with the
Mining,
different companies,
mining, detergent, carbon fiber,
carbon fiber.
aerospace,
Yes,
five
correct.
times.
Hmm.
So knowing that, what kind of advice do you give people for like interviews and stuff, to get hired, right?
Yeah. So for me, I always think like just be as genuine as you can be.
That's a good one.
Those that seem relaxed and able to just have a conversation, it helps me understand like, okay, like this is who you probably are going to be when you're talking with me once you start working here. So, be genuine, bring up stories that you've experienced in the past. I always think a story is a good way to show an example of something, not,
For sure.
don't give a definition of something. We want to know a story. Um, and ask a lot of questions in your interviews. Show that you're engaged. Show that you've done some research, of why, not just the, typical questions, but maybe try to be a little bit more outside the box if you can.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you can, like, what follow-up opportunities are there? Obviously, usually people give tours of facilities and stuff, but like you can ask more of a person that's hiring, what they could say no, but like, yeah, I'm going to follow up in 2 days. Whether you might get back to me in a week, but like, I want to talk to you again in 2 days. Like, what else
Yeah.
did you forget to ask me? Kind of thing.
Sure.
So that's
Gotcha.
probably my advice.
For interviews.
Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I wanted to make sure I asked you that. And then you went from director back down to individual contributor, right? So I guess what was that like for you? This is your latest job that you're at now,
Yep.
and can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it felt a little funny at first. So the role I'm in now is not anything to do with aerospace. It's not manufacturing. I'm in a continuous improvement engineer role.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of supply chain evaluation with manufacturing still, but it's very on like a project level base of things that I'm working on. Um, and then I also do a lot of training for the team that I'm on, because I don't want to say I have the most experience with manufacturing, but the team that I work on does not have a lot of that. And so I do with them as their supplier managers, I do training on root cause and corrective action and how to work with a manufacturer and different things like that because a lot of our group doesn't have that experience. And so um, it was a little bit funny for me at first. Again, I said I made the transition of, wow, I'm not keeping an eye on other people's projects. Do I feel
Yeah.
like I took kind of felt like, did I take a step down? Like, what will people think of me? Like,
I was
you
just about
change
to
that
ask you that.
LinkedIn profile and everyone's like looking at your LinkedIn, like, ooh, where did you go?
Yes, I was just about to ask you that. Like, what was that mental?
Yeah.
Like, did you kind of play mental games? Like, did I just demote myself? Like, did you feel like that weird kind of
Yes.
because you have
I
like
felt
your,
that.
two things pulling at you?
Yeah, I felt that. And then, especially the engineers that were working with me before, they were just waiting to find out what I was doing next. And so they were always checking in. And so it's like when I did make the transition, they were like, what?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to be our manager? Or like, and it was, and it was tough to explain to people too. I felt like I owed everyone an explanation when in reality it was like, this is what's best for me. And I haven't looked back since. Like I've been enjoying what I've been doing as in the role I'm at.
I think that's so cool because, I think once you get into that lane of kind of ladder climbing, like you said, I think people get locked into it. And I think there's a lot of pressure to continue climbing, especially where you have success, and you're able to keep going. It's kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, I guess I just keep going, and it doesn't matter if I like it or if my freedom takes a hit, the pressure's there. I need to keep going because that's what kind of society expects of me, right? But it's
Yeah.
cool
And
that you kind of
yeah.
totally said no to that and kind of learned, went I guess followed your priority, what your personal priorities were.
Yeah.
Cool. And um, so at your new position, you have a lot more work life balance, which is good.
Yes.
Do you
It has
think
been
you'll
really good for
continue
me.
on that road, or do you think you'll, I don't know, are you starting to get kind of hungry again?
No, I haven't got to that point. I still talk with a lot of people that I used to work with, and they're like, "Oh, do you think you'll come back and be a manager?" Or like, "Did you
Yeah.
want to come back here, to work for the carbon?" And like right now where I'm at, I'm still content with what I'm doing. You know, if a job opportunity came up and it, seemed like the right fit for me, I definitely make sure I do my due diligence again on work-life balance. Like I want to make sure I keep that on the
That you
forefront,
have that. Yeah.
that I have that.
I totally agree.
But I mean, right now, no, I'm not looking for anything. I can make of my role what I want to as well, meaning I have a set of projects, but like my skill set that I have is different and unique from the others I work with too. And so when I see stuff as a continuous improvement engineer, it's like that might not be something we're working on, but I noticed this and I think it's something good we should
Yeah.
work on, or I want to train people on it. And so I like to share the knowledge I learned from all my other companies with people too,
Sure.
because it's like, oh yeah, we did this and it worked really well, and we did this and it did not. So
Well, it's huge. I
they're
mean,
good.
yeah, it's just a very, very valuable, kind of collective experience that you have. So you like what you do now, and you don't. I mean, it sounds like you're content where you are, but you'll maybe, take an opportunity if it comes your way.
Yeah, like I
Um,
never want to close the door, but
no.
I'm not right now. I am enjoying what I'm doing, where I'm at, and people I work with.
So let me ask you this. So a lot of people, in order to maximize your salary, you have to jump jobs every 2 years. Is there a lot of truth to that?
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is. Um, and part of that with like the corporate world, I think when you stay at a job, there are caps and certain amounts that, like as a manager, you are allotted only a certain amount for those that are internal. When
Yeah.
somebody's new coming in from another company, that's a chance to steal someone. So you've got to make the like if you're stealing someone from another company, you're making that like enticing offer to
Yeah.
them. So
Well, you got
yeah,
to
I
give
do
them
think,
what the market is, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
yeah,
It's unfortunate, but it's true. Like if
yeah,
you're someone and you're 100% motivated by salary, then you should you should be looking at jumping roles every 2 to 3 years, right? I think.
yeah. And it's funny too, because that becomes expensive for companies over time. They
Yeah,
lose really good people, and you're like,
yeah.
it sucks.
And training, and all the stuff that yeah, it's weird. I don't like that that's how it is, but
I don't either.
it's weird.
Yeah,
I don't like it. Just pay people what they're worth.
yeah.
It's weird. Anyway, okay. Well, let me ask you this. So you're a female in engineering, and I looked up the statistic, and currently women make up 16% of the engineering population. So I guess collectively, what has that whole experience been like for you to be a woman in engineering?
Honestly, especially, I don't know, for the most part, I don't feel like I've noticed it a
Nothing.
ton at my jobs. Like I don't feel like it was like a huge factor for me. Um, where I do think like maybe specific like incidents and stuff, I don't feel like personally for myself I had much of a voice at the beginning. Like I would listen to others and I feel like I don't know if this is female or just people in general, but I kind of feel like at maybe some of my earlier jobs I got talked over easier,
Sure.
and meaning like I have an opinion, but then I'd be like, I don't know if I should bring it up kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas some of my coworkers, same role as me, were very vocal,
Yeah.
and kind of that might have been my own personal thing. Like nothing in the sense of like, oh, I'm a woman, but like I kind of feel like I needed to find my voice over time of like what I have to say is important. It doesn't
Gotcha.
mean we have to go with it, but like I had to build my confidence to make sure it was like I'm just as worthy
Yes.
as
Yeah.
anyone else in the room,
Yeah.
anyone else at this table.
Your voice is just as valid.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a little bit of that with every kind of fresh engineer that
Yeah,
comes out of school. Yeah.
I think
So
so
I guess
too.
what advice would you give, to I guess girls that are looking at engineering and maybe be a little bit intimidated?
Yeah, I think I would say, like trust the decisions you're making, be confident in what you're doing. Because like anywhere, you can get intimidated, you can get nervous about applying for stuff. You are going to probably, the likelihood you work with a group of just guys is very high, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like to me, I just think we're all people and we've all
Yeah,
got different talents, and don't let that even get in the way. Try not to even see that you're any different, because we all have value added, minds and things to bring to the table,
for
and
sure.
the confidence will help you, and don't give up. Like you're gonna have bad days, and sometimes maybe you feel like it's because you're a woman or something like that, but to me I always try to tell myself like I'm just like anyone else, and what I have to say is important.
100%. Do you think
Yeah.
um I think there's a big effort, right, to kind of get more girls in engineering. Do you think because of that there's more opportunity?
As far as like,
So like do you think um companies, want to hire I think at least the company I work at, I
oh
feel like
yeah,
companies really want to hire more girl engineers or female engineers. So I
yeah,
think it's really
I
smart to like, you know, at least for girls to realize like, hey, there's a lot of opportunity in this for, as a I don't know, what do you think?
I think so. I do think every company is looking like for diversity.
Yeah,
They want to hire women. It just brings another mindset like
for
to
sure.
the table, right? And so I think it's good for women to be like, you know what? Like when you're interviewing, I don't want you to think you got the job because you're a woman. But at
No.
the same time, it's like, you know what? Like you bring something different to the table, and I
Yeah.
would take it as that. Like you brought something different to the table, and they want to hire you because they want to have the diversity there.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for them to know. They're looking, like when I was hiring, I really didn't get applications for female engineers.
Yeah.
And when I did look at it, and it wasn't because it was like, oh, this popped up, but it was like, oh, this is different. Like I
Yeah.
hadn't seen this before.
Yeah.
And if it was a resume that was comparable to what I was looking for, it was like, yeah, I want to interview you. And if it wasn't, it was like, you know what, maybe we'll pass this time.
Sure.
So
Cool.
yeah.
Well, so where, I guess, we're pretty far into this now. What do I guess considering where you are now, where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself going? What do you see your priorities kind of becoming in the next 5, 10 years?
I think for me, like it's still gray. I'm still trying to figure it out, but the more the more each job that I've worked at, I realize I'm a continuous improvement engineer right now. I
Yeah.
look into processes, I look for opportunities, saving money, finding efficiencies, making things better. I think it would be really cool to just help even just like business owners or people with everyday like, you know, jobs and businesses that are out there. I wonder if my skill set could help like a larger group eventually, that I could help look into companies and, find where you can make more opportunity or things like that. Because in the engineering standpoint, I've worked for manufacturers and it's like I've done it there, but like why not maybe expand it outside of that
So
and
like
help,
consulting.
maybe consulting, like a new business owner is starting up their company and like, hey, I wouldn't mind looking into this with you of like, what from a financial standpoint, from a process standpoint, what do you have? Those
Cool.
are things that are interesting to me. I don't know where I'll take that, but sometimes in the back of my mind, I think it's something I'm passionate about. Where how can I apply that later on in life?
Cool. It's cool because it's so, your whole arc kind of, you start in real technical world, chemical engineering, and then to kind of see where you are now is just
Yeah,
really cool. And it's such a short amount of time. It's really neat.
yeah.
Um, well, sweet. We're like an hour and a half. I think I could ask you a whole bunch of more questions, but I don't think I'll keep you too much longer. So I think we'll end it there. But is there anything else you want to kind of talk about or say before we finish?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for interviewing me. It's been good to talk about and bring up a lot of memories too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, of
thank you.
course. And I want, is it okay if people comment, maybe you can come on and respond to the comments if
Oh
they
yeah,
ask you any questions.
for sure.
That'd be huge. Sweet. So all right. So well,
Yeah.
thanks, Sarah. And
Hey.
I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
All right. See
See
you.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Maybe you were able to pull a little bit of insight or just, entertainment from her story and from her extensive experience. If you have any questions for her or for me, be sure to leave them in the comments. And like I said, I plan to do a bunch of these interview type videos, so be sure to let me know your suggestions on who you'd like to interview or who you'd like me to interview, what type of questions you want me to ask. Leave all that stuff in the comments. I'd really appreciate it. But that's it for now, so thanks for watching and keep up the good work.